Hey everybody, today I'm going to be speaking with Patrick Dykstra, BAFTA award-winning cinematographer, marine mammal expert and wildlife TV presenter. Patrick has spent the last 15 years working in filming with some of our world's most incredible animals, swimming with killer whales in Norway, bowhead whales in Siberia, sperm whales in Dominica, and the world's largest ever living creature, the awesome blue whale in Sri Lanka. Today we're going to be hearing about some of Patrick's close encounters in different oceans around the world, as well as his quest to try and learn more about sperm whales by using his relationship with one particular individual. Welcome to the Explore the Road podcast. And so I think I'll start by saying thank you very much, Patrick, for being on the show. I really appreciate that you made the time to come in, man.
Well, it just gave me a good excuse to catch up with you again and hang out. I've missed you, so it's good to hang out.
I'm trying to think when we last saw one another.
It's been a year or more, I think.
Yeah.
We've exchanged some messages, but not in person. It's good to see you looking well.
Well, thank you very much, man. As are you, as I said before. You're looking tanned, but that's for a good reason.
Yeah.
And I thought I would start by explaining to everyone how we actually first met. So I can't remember what year it was that we were making Night on Earth for Netflix.
It must have been 2019.
2019. And I was given the sequence of filming killer whales at night, hunting around commercial fishing vessels in the Norwegian fjords. And having never filmed killer whales before, I was kind of like, right, I'm going to make some calls, send some emails, see who do I need to talk to about this crazy idea of swimming at nighttime with killer whales around commercial fishing vessels. And it was pretty much instantly that your name popped up and everyone was like, you've got to speak to this guy. He is the guy to speak to. And I thought it'd be cool for you to just explain, how did you become the guy to contact about swimming with killer whales in Norway?
Yeah, that's. I'm glad that I was the guy. But yeah, it was a revelation to me as well. So that first happened to me with, I think it was blue whales in Sri Lanka, maybe 7 or 8 years before. Because I was a lawyer, and I was just traveling around doing things for fun. And one of the things I had done for fun was do some research. Like in natural history, you guys have researchers. Their job is to scour the internet and talk to everybody they know and really find out what stories they want to pursue. And some of them are news stories. So you're reading old science papers and calling universities and trying to dig into these news stories, which I loved to do. I had no idea that it was something that natural history did as well, and it was a useful skill. And so I would try to find these places to go do these amazing things that nobody else was doing. And yeah, one of the first ones was these blue whales in Sri Lanka during their civil war. And it worked, and there were lots of blue whales. And then one day, a couple of years after I started going, I got a call from someone at the BBC. And they were like, hey, we got your information, and we want to come film blue whales in South. And I'm like, why are you calling me? Like, why in the world am I getting a call from the BBC about where to film blue whales in Sri Lanka? And I started to think about it for a second. I was like, wait, for those kind of detailed questions, which boat can we rent? Which captain is reliable? What time of year is the best? What's the underwater visibility like? What's the best approach? Like, wait, there actually isn't anybody else. I am accidentally the world's foremost expert in this very niche topic. And so this was also happened to be the case when you called me about, hey, we want to try to swim with killer whales at night. What's the best way to do that? And the best way to do that at the time, and probably still is, to go to commercial fishing vessels, because they're the ones that are going to draw the killer whales in. They fish overnight. They've got big lights. All the pieces fall into place. So yeah, I was very flattered. And then again, similar thing. I'm like, wait, why are they calling? Oh, wait, I kind of, again, am accidentally the world's foremost expert on this very, very niche thing that you guys wanted to do.
And so you went from being a lawyer to then, going and swimming with blue whales. How did that come about?
I wish that was a better story. I wish it was like, I was a lawyer and then I went on vacation and saw a whale and I never went back to work, or I went back and I flipped my desk upside down and cussed everyone out and stormed off for a life at sea. Unfortunately, it's not nearly so exciting. It was really part of not all of it was planned, but a lot of it was. I was in the Smithsonian Museum when I was 16, I guess, and I saw in the Life at Sea exhibit of the Natural History Museum this life-size replica of a blue whale. And I remember coming around the corner and seeing that and being like, wow, that's not like the real size of something. That's obviously a larger than life, not to scale model. And then I went over there and this huge was hanging from the ceiling. And then I looked and there were two plaques underneath it. And one plaque said, this is when we think life on Earth evolved. And then here's modern day. And then there was this little sliver towards modern day that said, here's when we think blue whales evolved. Then those little fingernail-sized slivers said, here's when we think humans evolved, like 300,000 years ago. That's interesting. Then the next plaque said, it was some dinosaurs and then a blue whale. It said, blue whales are the biggest animal to ever inhabit the planet. And I thought, that is the craziest thing. Our teeny little sliver and the also teeny little sliver of the biggest animal to ever inhabit the planet overlap. I was like, what are the odds? It's not some long extinct dinosaur. Like, I could go out, theoretically, I could go out tomorrow and swim with the biggest animal to ever inhabit the planet. And that immediately went on my life goal list. I kept a very detailed life goal list at the time. Like, you know, it really was a bucket list. It was things that I would be sad having not accomplished or done before I die. There was lots of stuff on there, but that became one of, you know, fly a wingsuit while skydiving, go in a hot air balloon, do, you know, wherever, visit these places, and see the world's biggest waterfall, swim with a blue whale. But at the time, I'm old. It wasn't easy to just Google swim with a blue whale. So I had to this is
I'm old.
This is like pre-easy Googling, right? So I had to talk to people, go to conferences, and there's a lot that goes into it, which I didn't realize at the time. You can't just look and be like, well, blue whales are here. Part of the problem is they're migratory. So even if someone says they're here, it's like, well, when are they there? Because they transit through different places. And then you got to figure out, well, what's the weather like? And what's the underwater visibility like? You know, it wasn't as simple as I had thought. So it took years of trial and error, but just as a passion to try to do this. And yeah, like just the backstory there of how I went from a lawyer to doing that is I went to the high school career counselor when I was 15 or something, and I was just curious, what do adults do? What do grown-ups do with their life? What am I going to do? What are my options? And we discussed lots of different options, and I volunteered to be the yard sign guru for this guy who was running for the U.S. Senate in my home state, because I was curious, what do senators do? I went into their campaign office because it said Senator Roberts, campaign office. So I went in. So Senator here? No, he's not here. But we're a small local campaign office. I was like, oh, okay. Do you know when he'll be here? Like, well, he's probably never going to be here. We're running the campaign for this county in Kansas. I said, oh, okay. So we got to talking, and they said, well, you can help because you have no job skills, but I had a car, and I was 16. I had free time. So they said, well, you know, here's a bunch of yard signs. Why don't you drive around town and look for high traffic intersections and put yard signs there? You guys, sometimes it's a homeowner, you got to knock on the door and be like, hey, can I put, it was, you know, entertaining, but I wanted to know, what does a senator do? Maybe I want to be a senator. I don't know what they do. Mm-hmm. So as a reward for being the yard sign guru that summer, I got to go to Washington, D.C. and be an intern in his office. Unpaid, but at 17 then, or 16 or 17 then, I was not old enough, you know, in the U.S., the drinking age is 21, mm-hmm. So I couldn't go to a lot of the functions they were having. So I spent a lot of time by myself, and I was poor. So I was doing free stuff, which the Smithsonian museums are all free. And that's how I found myself in this sea of life and saw this blue whale. But I found out maybe senator's not a good job for me. There were some things I liked about it, some things I didn't. So I looked at lots of things. Lawyer was one of them. I looked at wildlife cameraman, talked to a guy, a wildlife cameraman at the time. And it's a great job. It's much better than a lot of jobs. But I thought, you know, if that's how I'm going to pay my rent or mortgage, it can be pretty stressful. And you don't get the blue whale film shoot right out of the gate. You're someone's apprentice for a long time, and then you're doing, I don't know, clams in Vancouver Harbor when you first get to be the number one cameraman, and then eventually, after 20 years or something, you work your way up to the fun things. And, it can be hit or miss, right? The industry is boom or bust. You're busy, and then you're out of work for a while, and so...
And the people who make it, it's here or there, whether people are going to get through that kind of initial phase of, right, just trying to get your name out there as to be the person to call about any animal.
Yeah, well, and we're in an industry now where it's in a bit of a slow time. So there are really good wildlife cameramen who were doing 200 days last year, who are doing 50 days this year because the business is boom or bust. That would be very stressful for me. And I thought, I don't think, this is just honest, I thought, I don't think I'm fit for any long-term career. I don't think that fits my personality very well. So I think what I'm going to do is find a job where I'm not miserable, but I can make as much money in as short a time as possible and then effectively retire early. And so I looked at all kinds of jobs. And the other criteria had to be no risk, right? Because you can start a business and you can make millions, but you could also go bankrupt. And so I looked at doctors and investment bankers and lawyers. And lawyers an interesting one because you can do the math really easily. All the big law firms in the world, there's a category of law firms known as big law. They all pay the same. First-year lawyers make this, second-year lawyers make this, third-year lawyers make this, and then you can just do the math. Well, if that's how much I'm going to make over 10 years, I'm going to pay about this much in tax, I'll have this much left over. If I invest this much of that and live on this much, then I need to work this many years at a 6% rate of return on my investments or 7% or whatever it is. And this went along with my happiest times in my life list. At the same time, I had this, and I was 16 when I worked out this plan, so...
I mean, it's early. That's early.
Yeah,
that's early to be planning.
And things change, right? And things that you find really fun at 16 may not be what you find fun at 35. And so anyways, I the times in my life when I was the happiest, when I went skiing in the mountains with my brother, when my buddy and I were on vacation in Florida with his family, and I made this list, and then I came up with a number. How much would it cost to do the things on my list all the time? And I had a monthly number. Well, if I have this much a month coming in, I can do the things on my list all the time and not have to worry about money. So that was my number. So I thought, all right, well, I'm going to work, this many years. And for me, it was 8 years. Well, I'm going to work 8 years. I'm going to make this much. I'm going to live on this. I'm going to pay this in tax. I'm going to invest this. And then I looked at investments, not at 16, but before I got my first job, I looked at investments from, a bag of jewels to the stock market to bonds. And for me, it was middle market U.S. residential rental real estate. That was where I thought, well, that's my niche. And so from the time I got my first paycheck at the law firm, I took out $200,000 of student loans to go to law school. So it was funny. We represented Citibank at the time, my law firm. And so Citibank had a guy come from their private bank and say, any new lawyer at the firm is welcome to join Citi Private Bank, which is mainly for rich people. But they knew eventually you might be one of those people. So we signed up, and I had to fill out this form. And one of the things on the form, net worth. Negative $200,000. Just because I was in debt. But yeah, got a job at a big law firm, paid that off, invested in residential real estate, and in 8 years I was at my number. So I went into the partnership and I said, I'm not going to work here anymore. And they didn't believe me, right? They were like, well, which law firm are you going to? No, I'm not going to go to another law firm. Oh, you're going in-house with one of our clients. Who is it? Which one is it? No, I'm just going to travel around and hang out. And they were like, they'd never heard anything like this before. Like, you didn't go to law school and then get a job at a big law firm and then work 8 years and be up for partner next year to just walk away and do nothing. Like, you're going to go start a company. You're like, really, I'm just going to travel around, hang out. I have enough from investments now to live a life that I enjoy and to do things that are fun. I've had already by that time, had spent a lot of time swimming with whales and looking for them in unique places and other animals too. And yeah, so I just started doing that. I left the law firm. I spent more time than I already had been trying to seek out these interesting places in the world to have these unique adventures and unique encounters. And accidentally, actually, I was in Norway and posted a video on Vimeo. And then I got a call one day from a guy, Joe Tredenik, who might still be at BBC. He called me and he said, I'm a researcher and I've come across this video and we really like it. And I work at the BBC and we're making a wildlife series. And I was wondering if we can buy this footage from you to put in our wildlife. And I was like, I am flattered that you want my footage. You can have it. This is great. And he said, oh, well, when can you send me the hard drives? And I was like, well, I don't have them with me now, but when I go home next, I'll send them to you. I said, oh, where are you? Well, in Dominica at the moment. What are you doing there? Well, I'm trying to photograph and swim with sperm whales. Oh, we have sperm whales in our program as well. Maybe, like, if we send you a list of stuff to try to shoot, you could try and get it for us since you're already there and you have your cameras. And great, send the list along. So I got a few of those things. And then that started a bigger conversation. And then, he said, would you like to do some film work for us? And I came to Bristol and met with the team. And that show is what became Blue Planet 2.
Massive program.
Yeah, it was
BAFTA.
And then I won a BAFTA for the killer whale footage in episode 1 of Blue Planet 2, which was a lot of my drone work. So yeah, it was.
It's not too shabby. It's not too shabby a start in the wildlife filmmaking game.
And at the time, I'd have to check the numbers now. It became the most watched wildlife documentary of all time. So it's kind of hard. It's hard. The downside of this is it's hard to go up from there. Right? Then what do you do when you've won a BAFTA and you filmed for the biggest wildlife show ever watched at the time? But that was 8 years ago or so. I'm still keeping busy, finding fun stuff to do. But I think the moral there, interestingly, is this is kind of a theme of my life and how I got to where I am. Is when I got this call, I could have said, well, how much is it worth? Well, how much are you going to pay me? What other people? And he called another friend of mine because I put him in touch with another guy who had a little bit different kind of footage from mine, and he did that. Mm-hmm. What's it worth? How much are you going to pay me? And it just made their life hard. Mm-hmm. I think they appreciated that I was like, I'm so happy to be involved. You can have it. So, how did I get into wildlife filmmaking? I was nice to people. Mm. Be nice to people. You help people. People call. They want help. They want advice. You may not know them or have heard of them. It was easy, of course, when he says, I'm with the BBC. Okay. But you don't know where things are going to lead. And generally, I like to just, help people if you can. And they'll probably help you. And even if they don't, good things come to those who are good people. So.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think if you put yourself out there and you're nice, if you put being nice, being kind, being considerate out there, I do believe that does come back around. But I mean, it sounds like you created the opportunities to be in those positions. You went out and you did the filming off your own back. And I find that it sounds like you had a lot of foresight from a young age that you wanted to be involved in wildlife filmmaking, wildlife in some respect.
Yeah.
And then to actually go on that journey, and I guess we'll talk about blue whales. What was it like first going in the water with a blue whale? What was that scenario like?
Yeah, well, I had gone to lots of different places in the world and failed. I had looked for blue whales in Southern California, but not at the right time of year. Then I went to the Azores and found a sperm whale and a fin whale and pilot whales. No blue whale. Went to Mexico, found whale sharks, swam with those. So by the time I got to southern Sri Lanka, 2007, 8, it was right towards the end of their war, but nobody was going there, which was great. I was looking at bathymetric charts, and there was a 1970s vessel called the Tulip that in 72 or something, before the war started, had done a survey looking for sperm whales. And in their notes, sort of in these little asterisk footnotes, one of these like page 64 at the footnote, and we saw some blue whales along this bathymetric line. Well, that was enough for me. I was like, well, fantastic, I'm going. But it was a war going on, and it was not easy to get in. It was a really weird time. There were checkpoints every couple of miles. I recall it took us 7 hours, my friend Wade and I, 7 hours to get from the airport down to the south coast where these whales were. It's now a 2-hour drive because they built a highway. But wow. Back then, it was really the Wild West. And, they had a war. It was really strange. We kept getting stopped at these checkpoints every mile or so. Well, not that often, every 5 miles probably. And the guards would often ask the same question. Where are you going? Oh, well, we're going down here to the south coast. Alone? And I started making a joke about it. I'm like, no, I'm not alone. I'm with Wade. He's sitting right here next to me. You can't see Wade. Is he a ghost? And of course, what they meant is just two white dudes, no locals with you, like, and just like no convoy, no police support, no military. Like, what are you guys? What are two white guys doing driving on these rural roads 6 hours by themselves? Like,
Well, was there not a part of you that was slightly worried? Just a little bit.
Yeah, but that was part of the fun. I mean, you can go to these places, and it's gotten worse now because of social media, but a lot of places you go are just overrun with people and trying to take pictures and trying to take selfies. And, that the fact that it wasn't as bad back then, but the fact that there was nobody there was really part of the appeal. So, yeah, and that works. We got down to the South Coast. Wade had procured a boat. There was a lot of rules about that as well, because the Tamil Tigers were suicide bombing naval ships.
Blimey.
There was rules about how big your engine could be, and the engine size they allowed was 15 horsepower back then. That's not quite fast enough to keep up with blue whales, but we were just happy to be there and be out. And yeah, we got out to the bathymetric line where I wanted to be, about 10 miles off the south coast. It wasn't long. This was in early April, and we were out maybe an hour just trekking along that bathymetric line. I had some seafloor charts. This huge spout came up, and these blue whale spouts are straight up vertical, 10 meters, 30 feet high. There's no mistaking that spout, even though I'd never seen one, for what it was a blue whale. And so, yeah, it was amazing. We maneuvered the boat, shut the engine off, waited. You see it 300 yards, 200 yards. All right, I'm going to get in. So you get in and swim away from the boat a little, 100 yards. Oh, it's going to dive or turn or whatever. First try, came right next to me.
Wow.
It was unbelievable. Passed by, which took a long time, like a bus. My mouth's open. Oh, my God. And then I realized I didn't take a single picture. My camera was just sort of dangling because I was in such awe. And then it did something I've never seen a blue whale do since, and I've now had hundreds of underwater encounters. It turned completely around, came all the way back, and then I did take some pictures, and then it looked at the bottom of the boat. So I got this picture of like the bottom of the boat and this blue whale sort of looking at the bottom, and then it went on. I've never seen one do that since. It was a really magical encounter, and then I was hooked. Then it was like, shoot, I got to start doing this.
Was there any part of you that was slightly scared? When you first see it, looming out the gloom?
No, that one was okay. The first time I ever saw a whale underwater was terrifying. That blue whale in Sri Lanka, the visibility must have been 30 meters, 100 feet, so I could see it from a long ways away. And I had already swam then with fin whale and some sperm whales in the Azores and a few other places. So I kind of knew that the first time it ever happened, I was in the Azores. Which is not at all like Sri Lanka. Darker water, it's cold, you're in a 5 mil wetsuit, it's very exposed, the sea is quite rough, and that time I was, I had no idea what to expect. And I'm off of the Azores in a small boat looking for whales, and here's this spout, fin whale. Similar case, coming towards, we maneuver the boat, shut the engine off, wait, still coming, I get in. And I'm looking, I don't make this mistake anymore. I should have turned around and looked at the back of the boat or the engine to see what's the visibility like. Because, if you turn around and look back at the boat, you can look at, okay, how far away am I? Oh, I'm 10 meters, and I can just see it now, so it's 10 meter viz.
Right.
Or I'm 30 meters, and I still see it perfectly clear, so it's at least 30 meter viz. I didn't do that, so I didn't know what the viz was. And you're out, there's no structure, it's open ocean, the waves were bringing me up and down, and I'm looking, squinting off into the distance, like I'm going to see this thing really any time now. It's going to be this small thing, and it's going to get bigger and bigger and bigger. Like when you see a car coming from a mile away. I'm squinting, and so I didn't see anything. And then I saw a shape here, just caught the corner, and I looked, and that fin whale, I was floating on the surface. That fin whale came, and it glided maybe a meter underneath me. And so the first thing I saw was the blowhole, which was closed, and one eye was over there, and the other eye was over there, because its head was so wide, and it was so close to me. That was terrifying, because you're just squinting, thinking like, where am I? Where is it? Where is it? And I'm like, it's like on me, and it's the size of 2 school buses, and moving quickly like that was terrifying. I was alone in the water. There was no one to cling to.
Yeah.
It was really scary.
And you were snorkeling then?
Snorkeling then, yeah. But, it's one of those, and I guess it says something about my personality a bit. It was one of these things, I guess like skydiving or bungee jumping, where, you do it and you're like, that's so terrifying. Let's go again.
Yeah.
It's that sort of adrenaline thing. So, the real appeal of the ocean for someone like me, as opposed to, I've done some snow leopard trekking and some other things for polar bears and various things, but like we talked about at the beginning, you can accidentally be like the world's foremost expert in something at sea because it's remote, it's expensive, it's challenging. I filmed the world's first footage of blue whales nursing a couple years after that, which is eventually what led me to leave the law firm. I'm just a dude. Like, if you can have an animal in captivity, it's almost impossible to film the world first of a birth, nursing, mating. But at sea, we don't know anything about these animals. It's a huge expanse, very little science being done compared to terrestrial science. There's opportunities for some dude to be the first in the world to see things and to film things. That's a big draw. That's pretty freaking exciting.
I mean, I think also water, it's not as accessible. I mean, it seems an obvious thing to say, but animals on land, people can go out, you can drive there if you've had spare time at the weekend and you're in the area, sort of thing. But going out into the ocean requires just way more organization, planning. Even if you have all the best plans, the weather can turn and you can't do what you wanted to do, or you have everyone there in place ready to do it. I mean, for me personally, I find the sea, I love the ocean. I find it unbelievably scary just because I'm a terrestrial being, I sink like a stone when I'm in there. I enjoy it. But yeah, so watching you and the clips I've seen of you, swimming with these animals in these, for me, it's such an alien environment, kind of blows me away because for me, I can't help but think about things going wrong, and I guess these whales that we've spoken about so far, the blue whale and the fin whale, I mean, they're baleen, they're filter feeders.
Yeah.
When we were working together, we were filming killer whales at night. Now, how does it compare going into the water with a killer whale compared to going in the water with a filter feeder? Because they're so smart, they have so many different hunting techniques. How do they compare?
Yeah, well, I mean, fairly or not, I certainly think about it a lot more with killer whales. Part of it's weather at night in the dark, but I don't think they would ever do anything to a person, but I certainly, it's in my chest a bit more when you're in there and they're stopping, and then one passes by and you're like, oh cool, I filmed that one, and then you look up and it's coming back with 3 more and you're like, what? They're just curious, they want to come hang out, but there's always a moment like, what are they doing? Why are they all surrounding me now? What's going on? I had a time I was on the ladder. I'd taken a fin off and handed it up, and I reached down to get my other fin, and there was a killer whale. It was a funny view of it. I'm climbing up the ladder this way. It was straight underneath me, and like only a meter down or so. And I looked down to get my other fin, and then you just see this white and black face a meter away. Whoa! The instinct is immediately just pull your leg up. It was just curious. It was just looking, but even though I know better, I still think about it a bit more with killer whales.
What was your first experience with killer whales in the water? When did you first go in the water with them?
Ooh, yeah, that was probably 2011, 2012. I was in Norway. So that came about because, the killer whales, unlike, for example, sperm whales in Dominica, the killer whale migration to Norway is a much different thing. So, 20 years ago, there was a class of herring that came into a fjord called Tysfjord. Why that herring, and it was 4 years old at the time, I think, why that herring decided to swim. Normally herring spend their whole life in the mid-Atlantic. Every once in a while, and we don't know why, a class year of herring. And in that case, I'll probably get the date slightly wrong, but it was something like the 1993 class, 30 years ago. It was the 1993 class year. Decided, to swim 1,000 miles in October and spend November, December, January in a fjord on the coast of Norway called Tysfjord. Why they did that, we don't know. And then they swam back in January. But once they picked Tysfjord, they did it again the next year. Here they showed up again, November, December, January, gone again. And with them came killer whales, because they were normally feeding on them in the mid-Atlantic. They followed them all the way into the fjords, because then it's a lot easier feeding when the shallower, you don't have to dive as deep, easier.
And, well, you say, how many, for people who don't know, how many, when you say, the herring decided to come in, how many herring are we talking about here?
Millions of tons of herring. Like, sometimes they would occupy a fjord, and sometimes their fjord was like 10 miles long and a mile wide and 1,000 feet deep or 500. Sometimes they would go into a fjord like that. And this has happened in the past, where then they would all die because there were so many herring. Now imagine this, a mile wide, 10 miles long, hundreds of feet deep. They breathed all the oxygen out of the fjord and then suffocated. So like, we're talking, the biomass is unbelievable. So it's worth it for the killer whales to swim 1,000 miles or whatever the distance is and get easier prey November, December, January. And then they follow them again when they go back out to the mid-Atlantic. But it's a real mystery. Like, you can say, if I go to the lee side, if I go to the west coast of Dominica now or next year or 10 years ago or hopefully 10 years from now, I'm going to see sperm whales because that's where they hang out. If I go to Kenya, I can see some lions. You can't say that with the Norwegian killer whales because they just followed that herring migration. So when that herring class died out around 2000, 2001, there were no killer whales, not none, but there were very few killer whales to be seen along the coast of Norway. So if you thought to your friends, hey, let's go to Norway in November and see all these killer whales that come to Tysfjord every November, well, you'd have had good luck. 97, 98, 99, 2000, 2001. You went 2003 or 4, nothing. They were gone. Wow. And there wasn't another fjord system where the herring came in. And that was true in 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 for these, typical Atlantic spring spawn herring. But then in 2011, they started showing up again. Different herring, of course. This was now the 2007 class year. Why they decided to, and they picked a different fjord, much further north. Now they're in, then they were in Kaldfjord in this area around Tromsø. But again, killer whales came. And bizarrely, I think it's because of the way the shape of Norway is and the migration route from the Bering Sea, but humpback whales who didn't join in Tysfjord because it was not close enough to their migration route probably to hear all this commotion.
Right.
But once a new herring stock came to Kaldfjord, humpbacks who would normally be going from the Barents Sea down towards the equator could hear what's going on, and they detoured. And so now you've got millions of tons of herring, hundreds of killer whales, and hundreds of humpbacks joining that. And the year we went was after that class year had died out. So then this would have been now the 2013 class year that came not towards Tromsø, way up where we were in Skjervøy. And it was just luck that there was no gap in between those, like there had been between the Tysfjord days and the Kaldfjord days. There was no gap. So the Tromsø years ran right into the Skjervøy years. And then you've got, killer whales and humpbacks and herring all in those fjords that we went to. Yeah, and so the first time was in those, the very early days of the Tromsø years. And I had done some research and saw these, in Norway, fishes herring, and there's a quota on herring. And so because of the quota, there's a website you can go to, it's in Norwegian, that shows when boats are making a herring catch. They have to report it, and they have to report where. And so there's these dots that show up on the map. Normally those dots are always in the mid-Atlantic. 2011, these dots started showing up inside the fjord network. And I was like, I watched this website to see, are the killer whales ever going to come back? Sure enough, 2011, they're catching herring in the fjords again, like they had been in the Tysfjord days. So a buddy of mine, Kelsey, and I flew up there and started asking questions that summer and looked around. And then I went back. I met this amazing German guy, Marco, and we went on his sailboat and went out, and he was really pretty well versed. He'd been going since the Tysfjord days. So he was a very smart guy about this and knew, okay, This is how to approach them. This is how to go in. This is where again he was captaining most of the time. He didn't go in much.
And was it a done thing? Was it because now it seems like killer whale tours in that area
Now
seem
it's
to
a
be quite a
thing.
common thing.
Yeah.
But back then,
Not at all. No. I went and asked. I was just asking at little fishing harbors along the coast with a picture of a killer whale because I didn't speak Norwegian, although most of them spoke very good English. But have you seen this guy? Going to all these fishermen, and I went to one of these fishing harbors, and they said, "Oh, I haven't, but you should ask this guy who drives the ferry because 5 days a week or something, he's covering 300 miles of all these fjords, taking school kids to school, picking up people on little islands, running them around. The social system in Norway is amazing." So I should ask him. So I asked him, did you ever see these guys? And if so, when? Oh, yeah. This year, the first year. Yeah, saw them all the time in November, December, January. They were here every day. Wow, I'm coming back. So then I started asking more questions, and I found a guy well-connected local guy who said, yeah, this German guy, you should call him. He knows about them. He was doing it when they were going to Tisfjord. You should talk to him. So I did. He said, great, yeah, come along. So it was just he and I for that whole season. And then, there wasn't much tourism around that until maybe 2015, 2014, 2015. So we had 3 or 4 good years of not having any other boats around and just being able to swim and photograph and film and not worry about boats and people and tourists. And now that's not the case anymore. Now
it's not the case. No, I mean it's all over YouTube. It's it's a big thing. But what was it like? So you've gone there. You've kind of the first person there doing this sort of thing. It's not the done thing. Going and jumping in the water with killer whales doesn't really enter the mind of people, particularly living there. When you first were on that boat and you were out in that, I'm imagining very cold fjord.
Very cold.
And you first slip into the water, what was that like?
Yeah, no, it was scary. And that visibility is not 30 meters or 100 feet. That visibility often is 10 feet or, maybe 10 meters on a good day because they're feeding on herring and there's guts and blood and scales and stuff in the water. So it's not like you get these crystal clear views much of the time. And when you do, those are just fleeting glimpses. So yeah, it was scary. Thankfully Marco was there who had some experience with this and was like, no, you'll be fine. Go ahead. Now, he wasn't going in. So you're like, well, you say I'll be fine, but I don't see you getting in.
And was this around fishing boats as well, or was this just on their own?
No, this was just on their own mostly. Yeah, the fishing boats were a little further offshore back then, or at least where we were. So we were finding them feeding on. They were making bait balls of herring, and then we would just jump in. So this is when they would go down to the bottom, blow bubbles, swim around, force some herring to the surface, where then the fight is no longer in all dimensions because the herring can't go up anymore. So they only have to corral them from the bottom, left and right. Once they're trapped against the surface, they've got them, and then they start feeding on them, and it's amazing. They swing their tails through them and stun them, and then slurp them up, and so. It's pretty amazing stuff.
How many killer whales are we talking? They're obviously working together. How many killer whales at one time are you swimming around with?
25 maybe in a big group. I mean, you can see hundreds throughout the fjord, but maybe 25 working together to corral herring and feed on them and tail whip them and things. Yeah, I mean, it's amazing. It's some of the most unbelievable. And even from the boat, to see that many killer whale fins all at once and humpbacks lunging through and birds diving, and just the amount of biomass in that area is really pretty spectacular. It was scary, no question, and cold and windy and dark. And, it took some getting used to, for sure. It's not sperm whales in Dominica or blue whales in Sri Lanka, for sure. It's a different animal.
At what point from going in the water, seeing the killer whales, does it go from that initial? Do you get scared we're not scared? Is there a bit of apprehension every time you go in the water, and then does it turn into excitement and relax like quicker as you did it more, or do you just not feel any kind of worry at all at the moment?
I think less now. Yeah, now I'm so used to it and I've done it so much. The worry really and the danger in a lot of these things is it's really the animals. It's often the human-made stuff. Like, geez, we're 10 miles offshore in a single-engine boat we're one spark plug away from drifting out to sea, or that kind of thing. Or, the fishing boats didn't always love people next to them. And sometimes you'd get a great situation where there were a lot of killer whales at a fishing net, and the captain would say, no, don't come over here. And they have big bow thrusters that suck water in when they turn them on. It's to stabilize the boat and not let the net go under the boat. They could suck you in. They have a net thing there. You probably couldn't go through the prop, or through the blade, but it would be pretty bad. But sometimes the situation was so good, you'd say, well, he doesn't want us to, but if we scuba dive from like a quarter mile away and take a compass heading, we can just go right under the boat and hang out and do all our filming. He won't even know we're there, and then we'll swim back and then pop up and go back to the boat. But that kind of stuff, that's scary. We were doing that one time. My buddy Roman and I were under one of these fishing vessels filming. We'd done it a few times by then, but this one we didn't ask permission that time, and we were under it. And then you kind of know what's going to happen. You're safe for a little while. Once they turn the pump on, you got 15, 20 minutes, 30 minutes to be under there with no worry that they're going to start the engines. Everything's fine. So we were under there. And then all of a sudden this light went right over our head. Thankfully we were down far enough, because it was another giant fishing vessel coming over to help them. They had a problem with their net, and this other vessel came and hooked up next to them and helped them untangle. I think they pumped the herring from their net into this other vessel. But, that was, you're not in contact with the captain. Had we been and had radios and the right stuff, he would have radioed down, hey, we got to call another vessel in. You guys got to come up now. He's going to be here in 10 minutes. Would have got out of the water. It would have been fine. But, he wasn't cooperative, and we knew there wasn't going to be anything. We're not hurting his fishing, so who cares if we go down and film? But yeah, there's been some dangerous things like that. Or, you surface and you didn't bring lights because you didn't want to notify anybody or see you. Now you can't notify your own boat, and you're drifting, and they don't know you're on the surface, and that kind of stuff. These human-made things are often, always, I think, the most dangerous element of doing that kind of thing.
I mean, I'm big, you've worked with me. I'm big on the health and safety. That story terrifies me, dude.
Yeah. We would never get that by on a risk assessment for a legitimate film shoot. If it's two buddies hanging out, it's one thing. But.
Yeah, that's a whole different thing. But to be in those situations and to see, I guess, blue whales, it was a solo thing. The fin whale was a solo thing. To see a killer whale family unit work like that, what kind of things, how is it a different experience seeing, because they're both intelligent animals, they're both doing their own thing. How does it, compare seeing them all work together compared to like seeing an animal on its own?
Yeah, I think that's part of the allure for me of killer whales generally, is you get a lot more behavior out of them. It's interesting to see a blue, what's amazing, but they'll often just pass by. Whereas killer whales, your hit rate on seeing something amazing is much higher. Sometimes they pass by, but sometimes they go get a calf and bring the calf over to you, and then they swim around, or then they tail whip some herring, and then they eat. And then, just being able to really observe more of their life than just coming up for a breath and leaving is really special. And they give you a lot of behavior. They're much more welcoming compared to other whales of someone floating around in the water. I think because they kind of know we're badasses, we're not that afraid of you. If we want to smash you, we will. So get out of my way. And they'll swim really close to get a herring and do things. So that's gratifying, because then you can watch so much more of their life and really feel like you're learning things and you're documenting amazing things. And the sequence that you made for Night on Earth was fantastic. You get all this incredible behavior on the fishing boat in the dark, and I think that was the first time it'd been done at night like that. It was really awesome. Yeah.
Well, dude, that was down to you and me and Mark Sharman, and one team, one dream. That was to this day, I would say it's probably the sequence I'm most proud of. Yeah. Hey everyone, that is the end of part 1 of my conversation with Patrick. And part 2 is on the way, picking up right where we left off in the next episode. Thanks very much for listening.